Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming to our family concert of picturesque music here in the Chester Fritz Auditorium on the University of North Dakota campus in Grand Forks. And now, with the auditorium technical director Gary Carton providing special effects, Castle Everson conducts the University of North Dakota Band in The Immortal March by John Philip Sousa, The Stars and Stripes Forever. Our opening selection has a graphic setting. It was inspired by the bridge that welcomes visitors to New York City. Composer William Schumann says, "This bridge has had for me an almost human personality." He says it presents astonishingly varied moods arising from sunshine or fog, the traffic, his own mood as he drives or walks across it, sails under it in boats, or flies above it in planes. It's our welcome to you now. George Washington Bridge by William Schumann. Paul Bosey conducts. As an artist blends colors on his palette, a composer blends instruments of orchestra or band to present colorful musical forms. Composer Robert Jagger used a theme of Robert Schumann, the 19th century composer, to do that. Jagger used Schumann's theme of the happy farmer for 6 brief, colorful variations and striking forms. Conductor Keith Hakey and the UND Band present Robert Jagger's Variations on a Theme of Robert Schumann. ask you, what is more colorful than a storm? All kinds of textures and shades of light and dark, with flashes of light illuminating the clouds. Rain spatters or etches the pavements and etches the sidewalks and the puddles, and composer Fred Knappner may have experienced such a storm in Spain. He listened closely and created a composition as a display piece for the trumpet. Listen now to Warren Endersby, a resident of Grand Forks and a graduate of Red River High School, in the featured role of trumpet soloist, playing El Tempesto, The Storm, by Fred Kepner. Thomas Nagel conducts the UND Band. Another of the composers represented in our program sought to evoke emotions by translating two works of art into music. The result, The Passion in Paint Suite by Henri René. The first movement stems from a painting entitled The Persistence of Memory by Spanish artist Salvador Dali. Vivid colors and dream images were typical of his works. To see in person the original painting, The Persistence of Memory, you'll have to go to New York City's Museum of Modern Art. The second movement derives from a famous portrait of a man who frequented cabarets. It's the work of the French artist Henri Toulouse-Lautrec. It's titled At the Moulin Rouge, in English, Red Mill, a Paris cabaret. The music depicts the sparkling life in the Paris of nearly a century ago. That painting you can see at the Chicago Art Institute. As you listen now, be alert for similarities between those two artworks and the music, as Thomas Nagel conducts the UND Band in Henri René's Passion in Paint Suite. Speaking of paintings, we have more artworks to show you now. These came from the 2 first-grade classes at West School here in Grand Forks. They're the result of a special project of preparing illustrations for the story you're about to hear. The musical account of The Man Who Invented Music, composed by Don Gillis. Every first-grade child contributed at least one drawing or sketch to the story, and their work has been transferred to slides to accompany the story. Their imaginations will delight you as it did us. And their 2 excellent teachers, Mrs. LaVon Tennyson and Mrs. Dorothy Howe. Now, the story of The Man Who Invented Music, composed by Don Gillis and performed by the UND Band under the baton of Joanne Stein.
Wendy, it's bedtime. Pick up your toys and hop into bed. Please go to sleep, Wendy. Grandfather was the babysitter for the evening, and he would much rather have been playing checkers. Now go to sleep, Wendy. Wendy was 4, and she had an answer for her grandfather. Ah, it was an answer, carefully thought out, complete, and final. No. Not until you tell me a story. A story? I'll sing you a lullaby instead, Wendy. Grandfather was still thinking about his checker game. Come on now, Wendy. Grandfather will sing you a lullaby, and then you'll go to sleep, won't you? Well, probably not. Besides, Grandfather, you don't know any lullabies. Well, tell me a story instead. I don't know any lullabies. Oh, I'm the fellow who invented lullabies. In fact, I invented music. What do you think of that, young lady? Wendy laughed. The dolls laughed. And the people on the wallpaper laughed. And Gobo, who was an elephant, laughed so hard that the stuffing nearly came out of him. Please, Wendy, you'll never go to sleep if you keep laughing. Well, Grandfather, I'll never go to sleep if you try to sing. But tell me a story. Tell me how you invented music. Well, once upon a time, about 4 million years ago, the world was a dark, unhappy place. The sun rose hopefully every morning, but changed his mind and went back to bed. The birds didn't sing. They had nothing to sing. The bells didn't ring. They had nothing to ring. Nobody could dance. There was nothing to dance to. No drum majors pranced. There was nothing to prance to. Nobody whistled, not even at a pretty girl. Worst of all, the children never went to sleep, for there were no lullabies, so they just cried and cried and cried. Now, in this unhappy time, there lived a great inventor, me, your grandfather. I'd invented lots of things for the children, like dolls and scooters and lollipops and chocolate milk, but still they weren't happy. I tried to figure out why, but the kids cried so much that I just couldn't hear myself think. So one day I decided to go out into the woods to build a new house where it would be quiet. I took my bow and arrow, got into my car, and drove out to the edge of town. This looks like a good place, I said. But when I started to chop down a tree with my axe, there was a funny sound. I hit another tree. and there was a funnier sound. And then I hit a bunch of trees. And it sounded so good, I said to myself, Wendy, if trees sound this good, what will happen if I hit this big rock? Pretty good. I think I'll try another one. Even better. Now, another one. I think I'll try them all together. And so while I was at it, I just decided to go ahead and invent radio, too. I had a busy morning. I hit around on rocks and sticks and stones, and before you knew it, I was on the track of inventing music. So I rushed home and started inventing as fast as I could. And first, I invented the flute. Next, the oboe. But then I decided it would take too long like this, Wendy. I think I said I'd better invent them in bunches. So I said clarinets, bass clarinets, and bassoons. Get invented. And they did. And after the woodwinds, I invented the trumpets. Next, I invented the French horns. And then the slide trombones. And finally, the tuba. I think I had better change that a little. But that wasn't all I needed. I had to have sharps and flats and pizzicato, molto, lento, and staccato, treble clef, retard, repeat, allegro, chord, and boogie beat, major, minor, jig, and waltz, scherzo, downbeat, jazz, and smaltz, jukebox, drumstick, and puccini, bassoons, batons, and toscanini. And when I had put them all together, I had music. Now, all this inventing had made so much noise that people gathered from miles around, and since they all looked like they wanted to stay for supper, I had to figure out some way to get them away from there. So I said, abracadabra. But they didn't move. And then I said, hocus pocus. But they stayed right there. And finally I had a big idea. I said, January, February, March. And sure enough, the first music my instruments played was a march. something terrible happened, for when the people learned to march, somebody started a war. And the only way I could think to stop it was to invent dance music. Well, the dance music stopped the fight all right, and everybody had a wonderful time dancing. But they got so tired dancing, I had to figure out a way to let them rest. So, I invented the symphony concert, complete with a scowling music critic on every row. But you know, even with the birds singing and the bells ringing and the pretty girls smiling when they heard a whistle, something was still missing, and I couldn't imagine what it was until I heard the children cry. It was evening, and a little bird flew above the rooftops, a funny-looking, sunny-looking kind of a bird, and his song was the lullaby. And when the children heard the soft, quiet slumber song, they went to sleep and dreamed about ice cream cones and puppy dogs and circus clowns. And that, Wendy, then Grandfather stopped. Wendy was asleep, and the people painted on the wallpaper were asleep, and Gobo, who was an elephant. Grandfather smiled and closed his eyes, and then a strange thing happened. He seemed to be hearing voices, voices across the centuries. Beethoven and Stradivarius and Bach and Pan the Piper and all the others who had found ways of bringing sound out of wood and wind. He heard them, and he knew all their voices, which was strange, because all they said was, "So, you invented music, did you?" Grandfather smiled again. "Well, she asked for a story." Our next composition offers a haunting beauty that evokes feelings and images just as does a painting or sketches like the ones we've just offered. It was composed 40 years ago, and we're told that it's one of the most performed pieces in American popular music. Earl Hagen composed it, originally for the instruments of the famous Ray Noble Orchestra. The orchestra made a Columbia hit recording of it, and it became what the business calls a standard. Later, Richard Rodgers added truly poignant lyrics to the melody, but it takes only the long, lonely line of the melody to evoke a mood of half-dreaming reflectiveness. Castle Everson conducts the University of North Dakota Band now in Harlem Nocturne by Earl Hagen, featuring David Rowe as the saxophone soloist.
And a goodbye to you, a good afternoon, a good evening, and all the days to come may be good for you. Thanks for coming, everybody.